to share his experience of the Food Hub. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here today, and just really to tell a story about a small community in the west of Ireland and how we came together to, I suppose, try to improve our locality. So the Food Hub is a community-owned and community-run initiative. Drumshanbo in County Leitrim is a very small town, some would say a village, about 800 people. And we had one very large employer going back over many decades. It was the Laird's Jam Factory. So there was a tradition of food production in the area. And the factory, which is there, was a 32,000 square foot or a 3,000 square metre facility. Unfortunately, it closed in the early 1990s. And it employed at its height over 100 people. So in a small locality, you can do the maths, it was a huge blow. So the factory was owned by a number of different private companies throughout the 90s. It was owned by Larry Goodman's Food Industries and Keypack, but it never really took off. And this was the original jam factory, which was owned by the Laird family. As I say, it was in the town for 100 years. When it closed, everything went. So we had a tradition of food, and the community were always obviously anxious that it should contribute to the locality. So as it lay idle, it was a source, I suppose, of a lot of anxiety locally. So the community got together in the early 2000s and first of all set about acquiring the facility, which we did, and we secured a 99-year lease. And then we set about putting together, getting the funding to do something with it. So I suppose the overriding issue was that one employer, we felt that we'd never get an employer to come in and employ 100 people again in a place like Drumshanbo. So what we set about doing was dividing up the space we had to try and get maybe 10 companies that would employ 10 people each. And we'd spread our risk and we wouldn't be over-reliant on one company. So we had the good fortune to meet up with Orla Casey, who's here in the audience today. And Orla was a huge source of, I suppose, she mentored us and she advised us, and she's been a bit of a guardian angel ever since. And in her, Orla said, well listen, we can do this. And she made a couple of funding applications, and there was a sort of a healthy scepticism. You had a lot of retired local people who said, oh look, we'll never do this, we need over €1 million. So Orla made us some applications, and the first one she came back with says, well, we're after getting $250,000 from Leader. So we said, okay, we were surprised by that. And then about a month later, we got 300,000 from Enterprise Ireland. And a couple of months later, we got 450,000 from the International Fund for Ireland. And all of a sudden, what I suppose had been, just a bit of talk, suddenly was becoming a reality. We had to act on it and do something. So we put together the package which you see there, and it would be remiss of me not to mention another woman who's in the audience, who is Martina Early, who was who ran Arigna Leader at the time and is now involved with Roscommon Leader, who are one of the partners in the current project. And Martina was our first funder, and I suppose showed faith in us and gave us the confidence to go on. So we had to borrow some money. We put together 1.8 million in total, which included some long-term borrowings by the community. And we set about, this is what we did over a decade of hard work and commitment. Certainly it required commitment, because I remember in the early days, all those meetings, the local treasurer would come in and he'd look at the report and he'd say, well lads, it's just as well this is not for profit, because there's not only are there no profits, but there's no prospect of any profits. And it was a real, I suppose, a labour of love. And another analogy that was often said at these meetings was that film Field of Dreams, where they'd say, build it and they will come. So we built it and they didn't come for a while. And we just opened in October 2007, which I don't need to tell you wasn't the greatest time to open a facility like this, when we really had no tenants. We had one tenant, a company that were going to make ready meals, and they were employing 5 people. And we were thrilled with that. But the only problem was they were taking 2,000 square foot and we had another 24,000 there looking at us. So we did a full fit out of the premises. So we made it into, we did a full food grade fit out of the floor, the polyurethane floor, the food grade panels on the walls and ceilings, fully serviced units of various sizes. And you know, it didn't happen overnight, but over time it did, and perseverance and a bit of luck. And eventually, in the last 18 months, I have to say, it's really come together. So what we have now is a fully occupied site. We have 8 companies employing 64 people, I think, as of this week. That's growing, and we will be up to 70 by the end of the year. And we have a nice mix of companies. We have a cheese company. Sean is here. He's going to speak to you shortly. We have that ready meals company is still there, and they're employing 20 people today. We have a company making box tea. We have a jam maker. We have a small home bakery. We have a micro brewing company, and we also are the last project that came in, which Kieran referred to. We have a craft distillery. So in total, we spent 1.8 million. And I have to say that the distillery on its own has already invested that amount of money in the local community. In total, all the tenants that have come in have invested 3 times the original investment. So we have 64, 65 people coming to work every day in Drumshanbo. We have the spin-off of that in local shops. We also have 20 students who are learning to be chefs and for training for jobs in the hospitality sector. And I suppose that brings me to the kitchen. So the shared use kitchen is one of the first things we did. And it was that time I was speaking about while we were struggling to fill space. We decided to put in a kitchen for small food producers. And again, this is reflecting what was spoken about earlier. Like, as small food producers, you'll know one of the main obstacles and one of the main challenges is the actual premises itself, the cost of it, the regulation, the inspections. So we set about taking an American model. We set about putting in place a fully kitted out commercial kitchen that small food producers could come in and hire out on an hourly basis. And if they were onto something, they could maybe move on to an incubator unit. If it didn't work, at least all they spent was the cost. We were charging €15 an hour. So somebody could come in and for a couple of €100, they had 2 days, they could make their product, go to the farmer's market, test it. At least they hadn't spent 5, 6, 10,000 on the premises themselves when they weren't sure if the actual business was there. So in all that time, I would say one of the aspects of the whole project that's very difficult to quantify and measure is the number of small producers that came in and didn't go on. But at least they found out, without losing an arm and a leg, that there wasn't a business there. So that was a very valuable aspect of the business. So at the moment, as I say, we're in really good shape. We're talking now about not just, we have the training centre as well, which is going really well, but now we're moving on. This is a map of the premises, which is fully fitted out, and as you see, we have a range of different sizes of units, hopefully something to suit everyone. The smallest units were 600 square foot, up to 3,500. The shed distillery, that's 6,000 square foot. So we have a nice mix of businesses. Down here at the bottom, we had some space which was a store, which was never developed, and our current plan is this year we've put together what we think is a very imaginative plan to develop that into further incubation space. So that's hopefully going to happen subject to funding towards the end of 2016. That's the kitchen. Again, basic, but all of the facilities are there. So where we had people coming into us saying, the environmental health officer called out to my home. They asked me to put in 4 sinks in my kitchen and to build on a separate room where we wash mops and things. And daft, you know, stuff that's really just You'd have to see it to believe it. So everything is there. People can come in, as I say, and do their work for 3 hours, 1 hour a day, whatever it is, and off they go, and they have no other overheads. That has also evolved, and now we've also, as I said, the training courses, and in many ways, because we're not for profit, because we're a community initiative, I suppose the reality is that the training courses subsidise the small producers, and that's, we think it's how it should be. If the small producer comes in and if they're onto something, it'll develop into a business, hopefully in the locality. They might only have one job, they might have 3 jobs, but they're local jobs and they're sustainable, and hopefully, and they will all have a spin-off in the local area. So that's the model. It's worked really well. Even people we've had on training courses have come back a couple of years later with an idea for a business, and you know, where the throughput of people that goes through there, it's very gratifying to see them then make a breakthrough. You might see them in the local shops, or you might see them at farmers markets or whatever. So this is what our challenges at the moment is space, which I thought we'd never say, because we looked at empty units for so long, but we could fill the 5,000 additional square feet we have from existing tenants, would expand into it in a shot. But obviously we want to stimulate more companies, and we want to get more small businesses started. So we think initially that we could be looking at an additional 15 jobs, and as I say, that's ready to go subject to funding. It's a very different environment funding-wise than it was in 2004 and 2005 when this project started. But we'll persevere. So as I said, everything is full. So we have a waiting list of people, because there's such a shortage. People will travel. So even though we're based in quite a rural part of the west of Ireland, people will travel they'll travel 90 minutes up, to come to have the facilities, because there's so few and there's such a scarcity of facilities around the country. We've had people relocating from Dublin. Obviously there are lower costs and everything else. But a waiting list won't last long, because obviously people who have business ideas can't wait indefinitely. So hopefully within the next 6 months we'll have something for them. We're actually talking about a second food hub, and the committee members can't believe they're talking about this. They think they've lost their marbles, but we have the demand for it, and it's something that's under. We have another unused building in the locality which we think would be ideal, and we're quite a long way down the road in pushing that idea. The other challenge, of course, we have, because we're a community initiative, staff is a big issue. Most of the work, 90% of the work, is done on a voluntary basis. We don't have staff. We have a number of people on different funded programs, but we don't actually have a full-time manager. We don't have full-time staff. And in this context, the European programs have been a bit of a godsend, because not only have they, for instance, the Nourish EU project, where we're part of creating this healthy food region, we're hopefully giving ideas to our food companies to develop new products. But there's also there's costs and there's funding available through those programs that can help us basically day to day to manage the place. We're making a modest surplus now, and everything that's made in the centre is reinvested in the centre to make improvements for the good of everyone. So we're also looking at, we'd like to become involved in the wider scheme of things, the Food Accelerated Development Fund. One of the big things, people come to us and they say, can you help us? So there's a whole series. We try to hold the producers' hands and bring them through the whole process. It's difficult because we don't have the resources to do it, but at this stage we know what needs to be done, so at least we can guide them and give them a pathway to what needs to be done. These are other opportunities we see that are available. A distribution hub, one of the critical things for small business is distribution. To have the cost of having a van on the road, travelling around the country, doing a drop, doing relatively small orders. So we're trying to put a number of companies together so that we can do collective distribution. And that's a project that we're working on in conjunction with the local enterprise office. And we've gotten a very good reception, and we'll be hoping, if things work out, that we'll be able to put a van on the road in the near future. So we're involved. I suppose one of the other things that has come out of this is, and it was mentioned by some of the speakers earlier, is food tourism. And we'd spent so much of the last few years concentrating on getting people into our units, creating jobs. But there's been a very significant spin-off in the last 12 months. We were featured on RTE1's nationwide programme last September, and we got a huge reaction afterwards. People wanted to come and visit the centre and what we were doing, and they wanted to see food being made. They wanted to actually experience that, so they wanted to see people making jam and making box tea and making cheese. And we also have the distillery and the brewery on site. So tourism now and food tourism has become a focus of what we hope to do in the next